welcome to the Alumni House podcast. My name is Matt.
I'm the Quacker.
All right, Quacker, we are officially back. Back in the saddle. It has been a while. I think the last episode you and I did might have been before Thanksgiving. I know you've done one or two without me, but it has been quite a busy front half of the month for both of us, and certainly for me. But good news for everybody. We will be should be pretty good this week and pretty good next week. Then after that, you're going to be on your own because we don't know what the 2 weeks after that hold. But so tonight, because we've been away for most of the month, instead of trying to catch you up on all of the news that you've already read and we've read, that happened in the last month, or try to go through, all the rivalry weeks and championship games and playoff bracket. What we're going to do tonight is we're just going to kind of catch up on the news that is that we think is significant. And that's all we're going to do. So if anybody jumps on and wants to interact while we're doing it, we'd love to chat with you. But maybe a short episode, but we'll talk about the things we feel like we need to talk about more in depth. But other than that, we're just going to kind of catch up on news, kind of get our feet wet again. And then I'll be back tomorrow night solo to do Southbound. All right. You ready to get into it?
Yeah. We got a lot of it's a lot of coaching news is what it is. This is probably the busiest coaching cycle I have seen where the head coaches have changed. You see the assistant coaches change all the time.
Names.
But
I think that's what it is. When you look at LSU, Penn State, Florida, Auburn, Michigan, am I missing one? I guess Oklahoma State. Not Oklahoma State. I mean, there are other Division I jobs, but those are all jobs that coaches want. So I think that's what it is. I don't know that they're necessarily more than usual, but I think there are a lot of big coaching jobs. So all right. So like I said, we'll jump into the news, and I'm gonna hand it over to Quacker.
All right, so we'll start off with just some of the conferences that we don't cover, but these are, coaching changes and stuff that'll happen. So Marshall Faulk, legendary NFL running back, Hall of Famer, has been hired as the next head coach of Southern University. Now, Southern University is a HBCU located in Baton Rouge. I'm gonna have to sneak down and see a game there next year just to see Marshall Faulk on the sidelines. It's really cool that you have a lot of these former NFL stars who are kind of breaking into the coaching ranks by going through these smaller schools and the HBCUs and stuff like that, and getting their feet wet as a head coach at this rank and stuff, and they're also building up these programs in the process because Marshall Faulk's name brings a lot of recognition and stuff with it. So all of a sudden, just like Dion at Jackson State, you got Marshall Faulk at Southern there. So big deal for Southern. Now, in a move I didn't see coming, Matt, Jim Moore Jr. has left UConn to become the next head coach of Colorado State. To me, this feels like at best, a lateral move. Maybe he wanted to get to Colorado for some reason. But that feels like a lateral move to me. He had something really building there at UConn, but so he is left there for Colorado State. Oklahoma State has hired Eric Morse away from North Texas. That was a big thing because if North Texas had won the American Conference, they would have had a chance to go to the playoff. And North Texas is going to let him stay and coach throughout the playoff process as long as it lasted. I don't know if he's going to stay for the bowl game or not. I haven't heard that or not. Michigan State has hired former Northwestern head coach Pat Fitzgerald as their next head coach. BYU's coach Kalani Sitake, I think that's how you say his name. He turned down the Penn State job, which was really surprising. to stick with the Fighting Mormons there. He's going to stay with BYU. Got a contract extension. Um, Cal hired Oregon defensive coordinator Tosh Loopy to be their next head coach. Washington State has hired Kirby Moore, who was offensive coordinator at Mizzou. Toledo has hired Mike Jacobs for Mercer. UConn hired Jason Candle away from Toledo. I heard Jason Candle name come up with quite a few jobs before UConn hired him away. There were several programs who had an opening that his name was popping up a lot. So he was a hot candidate. So UConn has struck with the irons hot there. They want to keep that momentum that Moore had built there and keep it going. A bigger job here. Penn State hired Matt Campbell away from Iowa State. Um, that's huge news there. I've heard Josh Pate say more than once that if the Michigan job had come up a week before, he felt like Matt Campbell probably would have left for that job instead of Penn State. But he feels like that Matt Campbell's one of the best coaches in the country. He just didn't have the resources at Iowa State to compete on the level that he'll have at Penn
Mm-hmm.
State. Um, Oregon State has hired Jamarcus Shepard to be the next head coach. He was the is the coach offensive coordinator at Alabama. Kent State has taken the interim tag off of Mark Carney to be their next head coach. And then kind of the last of the we don't cover these. So just another, it's Michigan with Sharon Moore. And that's a messed up situation that with all that.
Yeah.
Um, I mean that was one of those things like I saw he had gotten fired, and I wasn't completely surprised by that. He always felt like a bridge, hire, just somebody to have in that position while they tried to get everything straightened out with the fallout of the Harbaugh era, or at least the end of the Harbaugh era, and then all the stuff about the assault and the affair and everything else. It got really weird really quick. Um, so um,
Yeah.
that that
So
that
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was surprised. So I was in a group chat with a couple of my buddies from up here, and while he was not, you know, like lighting the world on fire, he was 16-8 and 1-0 in bowl games. So before all the extra news came out, I was a little bit puzzled because obviously that's not the Michigan standard, but I don't think any school, and if you're being objective, right, as a listener, I know Quacker, you probably would agree with this, but like if you're being objective, um, any school outside of Alabama currently, because they just uh, had the greatest coach of all time retire, any school who as a coach goes 16-8 over 2 seasons and 1-0 in bowl games, they may be on the hot seat, but they're certainly not fired. And I mean
yeah.
at the biggest of big names. Alabama is the only one I can think of that might do that, and that's only because of where they came. And I really think that's more fan chatter than it is,
Hmm.
administration. So I was pretty surprised. Not that you're wrong about the whole bridge thing, but then obviously we very quickly got the other stuff to come out, and it's a sad situation, and we here at the Alumni House don't make a habit of talking football adjacent stuff. So we're not gonna like go into detail on it, but it is sad. And it's really sad when you think about somebody who was really young and had one of the top 10, 15 best jobs in the country,
Hmm.
and he may get hired again, but typically, not always, but typically when something like this happens, even if they get another shot somewhere, they're never the same. And the fact that he
Yeah.
wasn't quite as good as a lot of, like, think Bobby Petrino. Like, he got his next shot. He got a couple of shots, but he's never been the same as what he was at Louisville and then moving to Arkansas.
Hmm.
since his controversy came out. Hugh Freeze, obviously, uh, the Sharon Moore stuff is worse than both of these guys, but then Bobby Petrino and then Hugh Freeze after that, and Hugh Freeze has also was lighting the world on fire and hasn't been the same. He was great
Hmm.
at Liberty, but he got back to the SEC where he had really good success at Ole Miss and couldn't do it at a better job at Auburn. Um,
Yeah.
so it's sad. It's sad to see. Hopefully he lands on his feet. Listen, we believe in forgiveness and second chances here. So hopefully, he uses this as an opportunity to get his stuff in order and finds a way to forgive himself because I imagine if he has any if he's contrite at all, and if he's not, that's a whole different set of problems. But if he's contrite at all, the first thing he's going to do is beat himself up, and he should take responsibility. But then he needs to get his ducks in a row and try and move on and put one foot in front of the other. So, all right, now I talked about three
Hmm.
times as long as I wanted to about that. All right, what's next?
Yeah. All right. Kentucky has fired Mark Stoops. That was not a surprise. You know, that was a situation where what was it 2 years ago? He was on his way to A&M, and there was some boosters that stepped in and said, "No, no, we don't think this is the right hire." And I mean, he was one of the hottest names in the country at the time, and now he's out of the head coaching ranks. Kentucky has hired Will Stein to be their next head coach. Stein was the offensive coordinator at Oregon, played quarterback at Louisville, but his dad played defensive end for Kentucky
Mm-hmm.
back in the I think the 80s. So they feel that and they fill that position pretty quick. I don't know how long they searched, but it wasn't very long.
I don't think they
Um,
searched. I think they knew who they were going to hire before they fired him. But look, I'm going to tell you, and you and I may disagree on this, but I think that the winner in this situation is Stoops and the loser is Kentucky. Because the fact of the matter is, in our lifetime, Stoops has done more with Kentucky than anybody we've
mhm.
seen. I think the last handful of years, and you can look at that A&M thing and obviously there were reports that it was happening. We as fans without insider info have no idea, like, if it was like contracts were signed and they reneged, or if it was like, oh, we're about to do it. We just know it was really, really close. I think that
Yeah,
Stoops got to a point to where he was disillusioned with the fact that they only had so many resources at Kentucky. He'd take them as far as he can. I think, and this is no knock on Kentucky. I think Kentucky's an excellent university, but I think there's a reason that only one coach in our lifetime, has had sustained success there, and so to me, the common denominator is Stoops. He's going to land on his feet. He may take a coordinator job for a year or two, but I think he will be in a head coaching position before too long, and I think he'll do good. I I don't know about Kentucky, so
yeah, yeah. Yeah. As far as Stoops, I've heard his name connected to several defensive coordinator positions that are still open. So,
I
and
mean,
a
why
lot of them
wouldn't
are
you
in the
look at him?
SEC.
Yeah, why wouldn't you
Oh
look
yeah,
at him?
yeah. Um, North Texas has hired former West Virginia coach Neil Brown as their next head coach. UCLA has hired Bob Chesney away from James Madison, making it two coaches hired away in really 2 years by Power Four teams from James Madison. Of course, Bob Chesney will stay on with James Madison until their run in the playoffs is done, whether that is Saturday or if they beat who are they playing?
Yeah, no,
Oregon.
no offense to the Dukes, it's going to be Saturday.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but
I
if
I
upset
have a
happens,
feeling both of
he's
I have a feeling both of our little guys are going to be one and done. So we'll see.
but regardless, he's with the Dukes until the end of the line on this one. Um, Tulane has promoted Will Hall to head coach from offensive coordinator.
Have you ever heard of him?
Um, yeah, yeah. This is one where every Southern Miss fan is scratching their head, going, "Well, it couldn't happen to a nicer university." So
So I don't know. I
you
don't.
know,
I guess that means Tulane is not. Their fans aren't good. I
oh
don't
no,
know.
no,
I don't know.
no.
Um,
It's the rivalry between Southern Miss and Tulane.
okay. I
There,
just thought it was
there's a
maybe
big
the colors because apparently Coastal's like that too. So maybe that color combo or in that family is the issue. Um, yeah,
no.
the first thing I thought of
It's
when I
just
heard,
rivalry. Yeah.
when I heard who they were replacing Summerall with was you. I was like, I wonder what Quacker thinks about this because this was not a good situation at Southern. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
hate
look,
that.
you and I talked about him for a long time. I supported him up to the very end.
Hmm.
I was a believer in Will Hall, and by the end of his run at Southern Miss, I could not as a fan be like, yeah, I could see us doing something under him. And he kept crying poor, but I mean, look what with the same resources, look what Huff did in one season at Southern. So um, I've heard a lot more about there being no discipline, no organization, and things like that with Hall in charge. So I don't know.
Hey,
There's
maybe
so
he
many
learned his
sides.
lesson.
I hope so. I hope so. Because I did like Will, but you know at the same time it's just like well we'll see.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Stanford has hired former quarterback to Pritchard as their next head coach. He spent first 13 years of his career as assistant at Stanford before going to the Washington Commanders in 2023. Um, he was the quarterback there just before Andrew Luck. So kind of that time frame there. So we looked it up a while back. Andrew Luck was there from like I think 2008 2012 somewhere in
Yeah,
there.
way earlier than I thought.
So yeah. And you had mentioned Coastal Carolina. They have hired Ryan Beard away from Missouri State. Um, USF has hired Brian Hartline away from Ohio State, where he was in his first season as offensive coordinator. Now he's been a coach on the staff for a while at Ohio State. I think he's the receivers coach, which would make sense because he was a pretty good receiver for them. I think he spent a number of years in the NFL before he went back into the coaching ranks. UAB has taken the interim tag off of Alex Mortensen. For those who have listened for a while, Alex Mortensen, his dad is the former reporter from ESPN, Chris Mortensen, who passed away a couple years ago from cancer. Um, so, congratulations to Alex for that's a big step up there. Because in fact, one of the only games they won this year was right after they promoted him to interim head coach. So, um, you know, he obviously they felt like he can take this program, turn it around.
Yeah.
So, hopefully for him it works out. Arkansas has hired Ryan Silverfield away from Memphis. Maybe this is finally a Memphis head coach that leaves and goes to a program and works out away from Memphis. Hasn't happened very often. Um, for Arkansas's sake, hopefully it works out for them. Speaking of Memphis, they hired Charles Huff away from Southern Miss after just one season. Um, and I have some thoughts on that we can get into, after we get through with this. Southern Miss promoted Blake Anderson from offensive coordinator to head coach. They did do a search. I heard all kinds of names connected with this. I heard Ed Orgeron. Of course, you heard Blake Anderson. Um, I heard. I'm drawing blanks now on because I kind of just put the others out of mind when he was hired. But Ed Orgeron was the one that kept popping up, and I was like, well, that'd be really cool. I don't know how good of a coach he would be, you know, in a program like Southern Miss, but he would recruit the heck out of it. That's for sure. Um, but they stuck with Blake Anderson, and after listening to his press conference, and kind of knowing some of his backstory and all, I'm really excited about this hire. Um, really excited about what he stands for as a man as well. I think this is going to be a really good hire for Southern, and it's not going to be a short-term hire. Like him, he feels like one that's going to stay there for a while. Um, so hopefully, it works out as well as it's worked out his first couple stops as a head coach. Auburn has hired Alex Golish away from South Florida. Of course, Golish is one of the most sought after coaches this cycle. Um, Arkansas I mean, they thought they had him locked up, and they didn't pull the trigger in time. He, of course, um,
Well,
Auburn
Auburn did the
did.
same thing because
Yeah,
I was at my mom's house for Thanksgiving, and my brother-in-law and nephew are big Auburn fans. In fact, my nephew's a student there, and they they both felt like everything they were hearing. They were certain they were getting Summerall. That was on
yeah,
Friday, and I think Sunday the announcement came for both of those coaches.
yeah,
So it's funny Auburn didn't pull the trigger quick enough, and neither did neither did Arkansas. And so they both had to
yeah,
move to what was next in line.
yeah. Speaking of Florida, they hired John Summerall away from Tulane. Um, I think that's a great hire by Florida there. I think he's a really good coach. I think he's going to do some really good things there at Florida. He's won everywhere he's been. He won back-to-back championships at Troy, and he won a championship his first year at Tulane, or was this the second year at Tulane? Yeah, this is his second year at Tulane. So, but he went to the championship game 2 years in a row with Tulane. Um, and of course, uh, the big fish in the pond was Lane Kiffin. He got hired by LSU away from Ole Miss, and Ole Miss promoted Pete Golding to head coach. Interesting enough, Matt, Pete Golding grew up about 40 miles from where I live, where I grew up.
Wow, how about
He,
that?
yeah, he's from Hammond, Louisiana. So, um, I didn't realize that he grew up in Louisiana. He went to college at Delta State. His wife is a professor at Ole Miss. I think she's from that area. Her parents live in that area. So, um, like he said he wasn't leaving Ole Miss. Like that was his last stop he was going to make as a coach. And you know, so he's got his dream job at this point. As the head coach of Ole Miss, and for them, I hope it works out. And of course, Lane has, he's stepping into a really good situation there at LSU. That they're invested in money into the program. Um, they're the first school to sign like an exclusive contract for NIL stuff with Nike, where like I think it was like 10 or 14 like athletes from throughout different programs
Mm-hmm.
around the school have like exclusive design deals and stuff, or input deals and all with Nike. It's a they've been a Nike school for 30 years or more, and that's this is like a first of its kind deal that's been signed. Um, I look for other schools to pop up with something like, I mean, Florida's got what they're Jumpman, right? I mean,
It's
it's
Jordan,
still
yeah.
Nike, but it's the Jordan, yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if like a Florida had something like that pop up soon with
Say it
them.
again.
That similar deal that LSU has signed with Nike, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw like a Florida, have something like that, something similar to that pop up with the Jordan brand.
Tell
Obviously,
me,
the first one you would
s-
think of would be UNC, but
well, say again what
it's
the
the
deal
NI.
was.
It's what it's their it was a contract extension with Nike to continue making their uniform and stuff, but it also opens up some NIL opportunities for like it's 10 or 14 or somewhere in that range of their athletes from throughout the different sports teams. I think it's like two football players and a couple of basketball players and baseball and
Hmm.
different
I see.
different programs where players actually have like input on design of like shoes or like workout gear and stuff like that and all. So it's I'm still trying to figure out um all the ins and outs of it because it's kind of it's the first of its kind, but it's a huge advantage in recruiting because all of a sudden you can say, well, hey, look, we've got this deal here nobody else has. You can come here, and if you work hard, all of a sudden you can get this exclusive deal with Nike that you can't get anywhere else. So I wouldn't be surprised if like a Florida, and obviously if it's going to happen with a Jordan brand, it's going to go to North Carolina first because Jordan and North Carolina were hand in glove, So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, well, but and again, all of that is so strange the way it works. So I just don't know. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'd have to see, what's what because I just don't know, um, the rules, for all of that.
yeah.
So, um, but all right.
Well,
So,
obviously the rules are kind of the wild west right now with NIL stuff. I mean, like they're trying to get it straightened out some, but until they have, I hate to say, you either have government step in and set rules for how things work, or you have some kind of governing body that's not the NCAA because they have shown they're too incompetent or they just don't care to to step in and set these boundaries and set
mhm.
up really kind of an NFL type system is what they're going to have to go to a professional style model um, for what they have now because it's just it's not this is not a sustainable model what we have right now with the NIL,
Right.
the transfer portal. Of course, they've shrunk the window with the transfer portal, but it's still you can still continue to hit the portal as many times as you want. I just saw where I'm drawing a blank on his name. But he was a quarterback that started out at LSU. He went to Auburn. He's been to like six different programs, and he's hit the portal again, asking for another year of eligibility. And I'm like, at some point, you have to get a cap on all this stuff. You can't just
I
play unlimited seasons. And
Yeah, I think I
you
know
know,
who you're talking about. I can't remember who it is, but I think I saw that. And it's just like, man, like yeah.
yeah, because his first season was 2020. Because that was the Ed Orgeron, the COVID year. I remember there was a kid from Mississippi who was like he he started out at LSU before Joe Burrow got there, and of course Burrow came in and beat him out, you know, rightfully so. And then after Burrow left, it was going to be his team, and he started the season lighting it up for LSU. And then he
Right.
had like a core injury and was out the rest of the season. And that's when this kid came in for a couple of games, and then Max Johnson, who is uh, his dad, Brad Johnson's son, who was the NFL quarterback, played for the Buccaneers, won the Super Bowl with the Buccaneers. Um, he was quarterback for a couple of years there. But this kid was a 5-star out of Ponchatoula, Louisiana, and he has not lived up to. I mean, like when he's on the field, he's really good, but like he hasn't stayed in any one place more than like a year or two. He's transferred more times than he's played seasons.
Yeah, that's wild to me. That is
Yeah.
yeah, that's really wild. All right, so what else do we have?
As far as coaching news, coaching changes, that's all of it. I did want to kind of talk about Memphis hired Charles Self away from Southern after one season,
Hmm.
and kind of some of the stuff I was seeing from Southern fans were all like, "Oh yeah, sign me up for this. I'm all for this." All these coaches that we get that are short term, we always win under them. It's these coaches that come in who say they want to stay, that we our program falls apart under, and that is such a loser mentality to me to look at. Well, we want to be a turnstile coaching stop.
Yeah.
You know, that to me, you want to be a program where coaches want to go to build a legacy. You don't want to be just that next step for them to get a bigger, better job. It's hard to continually have to sell the program to recruits, to fans. When you're constantly, we're like, well, we're having to introduce now this the 57th head coach of Southern Miss. We were 23, 10 years ago, and we had to hire 20 coaches in the last 10 years because they left whatever,
Right.
and um it's Southern has a very proud tradition, and
Yep.
to me a lot of this goes back to when they fired Jeff Bauer. Jeff Bauer was a Southern Miss alumnus, right? He played football, he played quarterback at Southern Miss. His dream was to coach there. He was pursued by NFL teams. He was pursued by bigger universities and stuff, but he never left. Part of that was because he had a daughter that had died there in
Hmm.
Hattiesburg. If I remember right, I think she was killed in a car wreck.
Yeah, I
But
think
she,
you're right.
that's where she's buried. So he was like, "This is my home. This is where I want to spend my entire coaching career." And this was in the time that Boise State was really starting their ascension. We just seen them win the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma, and you had a lot of these big money boosters and stuff that were like, well, we want to be Boise State. Well, if you look in the Boise State community, Boise State's community really supports like the whole town's behind it and stuff. And unfortunately for Southern Miss, it's not like that. We've
Right.
got two SEC schools in the same state. You've got a ton of people who go to Southern Miss who will comment about, oh, this team looks terrible. They, this and this, they're not doing this. And then you look at their profile and they're in, Oxford or Starkville or Tuscaloosa on Saturdays, instead of being in Hattiesburg, spending the money, you know, supporting the football team, or and you know, you go around the businesses and ask them, to support it, and a lot of businesses are like, well, we pull for this other team, so we're not going to support even though you're local, and a lot of people in the community do want to see the support for the school. It's not the same level of commitment that like a Boise State has. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a lot of support for Southern Miss, but I mean, they're a really good run this year. You look around the stadium, it's half full, and you're just going, what have we got to do to get fans in here? Um,
Right.
you know, I mean, at the peak, when Fedora was there, you would see it three-quarters of the way full for the most part, But to me, you got to get a coach in there that can stay long term, that's going to, build a consistent winner, that's also going to be able to help build up the program and the fan base. That's all got to grow hand in hand, and part of that's got to be fans are going to have to make a commitment to be fans. I mean, who I pull for. I've got other teams besides Southern Miss that I've been a fan of my whole life, but I'm at the Rock. If the game's there, I'm there. And you can be a fan of multiple teams, but
Right.
still support your alma mater.
Yeah.
And until we start seeing um, fans make that commitment to support your alma mater, unfortunately we're going to be a turnstile school, is what it feels like.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned Jeff Bauer because I was going to say that. Like that's where unfortunately a school like LSU can afford to fire, and I didn't think this was a good idea, but they can afford to fire a guy like Les Miles and wind up back on their feet. You know, they'll land on their feet.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Southern had something that basically no G6 school has. Southern, and you mentioned Boise State, which was a great comp because Chris Peterson was very similar to Bowers. Now he didn't. He eventually left for Washington, but he stayed for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think that I think that that's the issue. You know, they won one Conference USA championship since Bowers left, and it was a good win against an undefeated Houston team, but that was also with a coach who was on the way out the door in Fedora. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think you're completely right, and it's interesting because I think you're right about the situation with the fans, but I also feel like this is not the fans. This is up to the administration to make changes, you know. And how do you find a guy who wants to be your guy and not somebody else's guy?
Yeah.
You know, and that's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you have the fan support there, like you have at a Boise State, where the stadium's packed out, well, then you're gonna have more resources to be able to bring in a coach, and we're like, well, we can match. Obviously, you can't match $13 million like an LSU could, or an Ole Miss could, or take your pick. But um, you know, if you're packing the stadium out, well, we can afford to expand the stadium now. We can make this a more attractive destination for bigger star, bigger recruits to come in. We can do this. We can afford to hire better assistants. We can afford to pay our head coach more. And until it really feels like it's going to be a generation thing where you got to have fans now that are committed to raising their kids to be Southern Miss fans first, and then what? Okay, you can pull for an Alabama, as long as Southern Miss is your number one priority, as far as teams go. Um, but you know, you have so many who, well, I grew up a fan of this team, and they're always going to take precedence over Southern Miss, even though I graduated from here, even though I spent all my college years here and had a great time. Until you have that full buy-in from the fan base, it just feels like we're just going to kind of sit in this cycle and just be, you know, perpetually, yeah, they're okay. They're not what they used to be.
Yeah, and
But
that's and that really is. I mean, that really is sad. But it's like, how do you deal with that? Um,
yeah,
and like I said, I think the onus is on the administration to make the changes. And like you said, it's that never-ending cycle. Because if they would just make the changes they need to make, then butts would be in the seats and money would be in their pockets. But it's hard because you got to find a guy. Because you mentioned people getting pulled away. You got to find a guy who wants to be there, who wants Southern to be his job. And that doesn't necessarily have to be an alumni. I feel like more times than not, it winds up being an alumni, but it doesn't have to be an alumni,
mm-hmm.
But just go find the right guy, get him in there.
Yeah, and when I was talking about Blake Anderson taking over as head coach, and I said I felt like he was a guy who was going to be there long term, and part of the reason I said that was because during his press conference, if you don't know his story, I don't know the whole thing, but I know parts of it. But I know he's a widower. His wife died from cancer, I believe. I think in like 2018. But he had coached at Southern Miss. He was the offensive coordinator under Fedora. And after Fedora left in 2011, it came down to him and Ellis Johnson to be the next head coach. Well, the AD at the time picked Ellis Johnson, so he went to North Carolina with Fedora. And of course, Southern tanked the next year, went 0 and 12. They fired him after 1 year, brought in Todd Monken, great hire, but it took him 3 years to become a winning team again.
Right.
Um, and in fact, the his one winning season was when me and you and your dad and all we went to Kentucky for that game.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was his one winning season. And then they brought in another guy who was a Mississippi guy. Um, and he stayed there for 5 years, Jay Hobson. And they were just kind of like they would go to bowl games, but they weren't real competitive. You weren't winning the Sun Belt. I mean the Conference USA. You were just kind of yeah okay they're 7-6, 7-5. Might win 8 games one year, and then of course COVID came around in that season. He stepped away after the first game. I think he had cancer come back. He stepped away, and then of course they brought in Hall, another Mississippi guy, and it didn't work out with him. Then bring in Huff, and we all knew he was not going to be a long term answer, because he just. But I didn't expect him to leave after 1 year.
Right.
But when I saw the news, it's like I believe it. I believe he's leaving, and it hit me hard. I was like, "Are you serious?" I mean, he just got here. Like he had a cup of coffee, and he's gone again. But at the same time, like Marshall fans were like, "Well, he was doing this every year at Marshall. He was looking to leave, and you know, he got the Southern, and I was watching the press conference, and the head coach was, I mean, the AD was like, we didn't expect to be here this quick, uh, having to do this again because it's basically like a year to the day
Right.
that they did the press conference. But Blake Anderson talked about how Huff brought him in. He didn't have to do it, but he felt like God was leading him back in, right? And he's since remarried. Like his wife, his current wife is a widow as well. They have a blended family, and I think they have another young child that they had together. Because I heard him talking. He said our little one's here somewhere. He's probably tearing in the hall somewhere or something. Like it was funny. Um, but he really talked about his faith. He said, I feel like God has me here at this time for a reason. And he won two Sun Belt championships at Arkansas State, and then he went to Utah State and won a championship there. And I think that was the first championship they had ever won in football. He went to 9 ball games in 10 years as a head coach. And all of his head coaching stops have been at group of 5, group of 6 schools and stuff. And it just really feels like he wants to be like he's sitting here and trying to live in God's time and stuff. And you know it just he feels like somebody he's not just going to move just because he's gotten this offer from a bigger school. If he feels like because to listen to him talk, the football field is also his mission field.
Right.
And so if he feels like, well, this is where I'm supposed to be, this is where God wants me, then he's going to stay there. And that's one of those things. That's the kind of coach that winds up staying long term, like a Dabo Sweeney at Clemson, or I'm trying to think of another, Bobby Bowden at Florida State. Of course, you know, Bowden had a really good thing going there at Florida State for a long time, so there was no need for him to leave. But if there had been another job come open I don't feel like he would have left because he felt like that was his where he was meant to be.
Yeah. Now,
You
I
know,
mean,
and
obviously it's a little different with Bowden just because he built Florida State into a premier job.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So little bit different, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The sentiment is largely the same.
Well, in a way, Dabo has built Clemson into a premier job that it's fallen off here in the last year or so. I mean, of course, a year ago they were in the playoffs, but um, it was a rougher year this year. But I mean, that job was not a super appealing job before he's turned it into what it is. Um, you know, um, but these guys live, faith first. They're out in front with it and stuff, and you could tell that they feel like this is where they're called to be. and you could just tell listening to Blake that this is where he feels like this is where he's supposed to be.
Right.
And that's the kind of coaches that you can see staying long term and building something. And you just hope that the fans will respond to seeing him staying there and building a consistent winner, and you know support like they should.
Yeah. Well, here's to hoping.
Yeah,
Yeah, but that is going to be interesting. We're just going to have to, obviously wait and see how it turns out. But obviously, you and I both, it's no secret, we have family ties to Southern. You went to Southern, so we both have a vested interest in them doing well. So we will see how it goes. So let me ask you this: so we're going to do a playoff preview here in a couple of days. Do you think that either one of these, they're not lame duck coaches because they're moving on to
hmm
greener pastures, but the two coaches that are in the playoff, so Tulane and James Madison, do you think either or both or neither, how do you think they're going to fare in round one? And you don't have to get in depth because we're gonna do it. We're gonna do a preview in just 48 hours, but just on the subject of coaches.
yeah. If one's going to struggle just based off of what he's been doing, because he's been working two jobs, it'll be John Summerall,
Mm-hmm.
because it sounds like he's only sleeping like 2 hours a night right now because
Yeah,
he's working
I
two full-time jobs
I don't
between
know how
Florida and
he's
Tulane.
I don't know how he's sleeping.
Yeah. Um, I mean, he's like working two phones, and he's trying to keep both programs going at the same clip they are. And I haven't really heard that much about what Bob Chesley is doing with JMU and UCLA. I know he's invested with trying to get JMU as far as he can. I don't feel like I don't feel like James Madison would go in unprepared for this game. I feel like
No,
if anything
go ahead.
with Tulane, I mean with Will Hall staying and becoming the next head coach there, I don't know that they come in unprepared either. But if one's going to be coming in maybe a little more unprepared than they would normally be, to me it feels like it would be Tulane, just because of what Summerall is doing right now with trying to be the head coach of
Yeah.
two teams at the same time.
Well, I do think you're right. I think that they are going to be. I think they have to be. I don't think there's any way they're not less prepared. However, I also think they're a little better than JMU. So I don't know that we'll see it. Plus, Ole Miss is actually without their head coach. Um, you know, so I agree, but it's weird because I think Tulane might have better athletes, and they've played Ole Miss before, and now they don't have Lane Kiffin. So do I think Ole Miss is going to out athlete them? Yes. Do I think they're going to win easily? Yes. Do I think it's going to be a little different game than it was the first time? Probably. Um, you know, um, but yeah, I mean, just the nature. We talk a lot about, you can throw a rock and hit Louisiana from where you live in Mississippi. So you got to figure that a lot of those Tulane players would have loved to have played for Ole Miss, and they just got housed by them, month and a half ago or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only part of it. Like, it really has nothing to do with the coaches, but it's like I'm kind of interested to see, or I mean, it has nothing to do with James Madison and Tulane's coaches. I'm interested to see the response because they didn't do Tulane any favors, but I don't think they did Ole Miss any favors either. Because that's not a game I think Ole Miss wants to have to play often. So,
Right.
but speaking of which, so we didn't talk about one of the more perplexing things. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, that's an interesting situation with Tulane and Ole Miss too, because you've got really, I mean, Ole Miss's head coach is in place. Pete Golding is the next head coach. Or he is the current head coach as well. So now his staff is unsettled as far as like offensive staff. I don't know what he's going to have. I know like Charlie Weiss is being allowed to coach the team, but they're not letting Lane coach. But then on the other sideline, you got Will Hall, who's running offensive coordinator, who is the head coach for the upcoming season, while John Summerall is coaching out the remainder of his tenure while also being the head coach of Florida. It's a very
Yeah.
fluid situation, And then you look at like Oregon. Dan Lanning's not going anywhere unless he
Mm-mm.
gets fired. Like he has said, I have no interest in any job other than where I am right now.
Yeah, and he's not getting
And
fired.
yeah, and so and then James Madison is kind of in the similar situation as Tulane, where their head coach is leaving, but he's staying through this however long the run is. But to me, the Ole Miss one is more like the Ole Miss Tulane game is it's much more interesting because of the dynamics that are in
Yeah.
play right there because of the head coach, not head coach stuff on the Tulane side, and then
Well, it's it's
with
it's an
you know,
interesting contrast because you have stability at Ole Miss, yes, because you have your new head coach who's been on the staff all year. Um, but it's a brand new operation, and even if he does everything identical to Lane Kiffin, he's still a different coach. He may
hmm
call a play different, or may do this different or whatever. So that's interesting. And the other side of it is outgoing long-term stability because a lot of these players have been with him. Well, some of them have been with him for at least 1 year, but a lot of these players have been with this staff for 2 years. So
hmm
but they also know they're leaving. So it's like, yeah, we know the routine, we know how to play for this coach, but he's leaving. And then on the other side, it's like we know how to play for this coach in this role, but not in this role. So I don't know.
yeah.
We'll see how it goes. It's going to be interesting. But I want to close on this because we didn't talk about this and it occurred to me. So you and I text about this a little bit. Probably the most perplexing thing that happened is James Madison, who has really had they have kind of made a name for themselves since coming up because they've basically been instantly one of the top G6 schools. Like the second they got up, they
hmm
were up there. Well, they hired Billy Napier. Now, before all the scoffers start, and I'm sure that this was a condition of his hiring, but I don't know if you saw this, Quacker, but he has already said he will not call plays, which you and I talked about over and over again was one of, if not the biggest issue at Florida.
Right.
So on the one hand, I'm like, why would you hire a guy who you just saw fail? But on the other hand, if you take away his play calling and let him hire an actual offensive coordinator or make him hire an actual offensive coordinator,
hmm
is is that a good hire? It's a weird hire, but I think
Yeah.
it could be a good hire because we talked about it a lot. Josh Pate he says this all the time. I can't turn his show on without him saying this. Billy Napier had Florida operating in every aspect like a championship, elite level championship program, except
hmm
in the wins and loss column. And I think you could pretty easily trace that back to a bad defensive coordinator hire and 4 years of him calling plays. So if he learns his lessons, does he go back with a new offensive coordinator and light it up at JMU, or is he ruined forever?
I mean, he won championships at ULL before the Florida hire. I mean, he was one of the hottest names in the country at the time he
Mm-hmm.
was hired at Florida, and so he's shown he can win at the Group of Six level, showing he can win in the Sun Belt. Um, having the experience he's had there, I'm sure he's learned a lot in his time. I mean, he's shown he can recruit against anybody in the country. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can't say Florida didn't have talent because that
Oh
was not the
no,
problem they had there.
no. I think. Well, that's what I'm saying. I feel like Florida was a well-oiled machine in every
Yeah,
aspect
yeah,
except
yeah,
for winning games.
yeah.
And so that's
And they
kind of
won
the
games that they shouldn't have won, and
right.
they lost games that they shouldn't have lost. So
Yep.
that was
And
very perplexing.
that's one of the things we'll talk about this more in the off season, but that's one of the things I'm interested to see with Summerall if he's the coach we all think he is, well, he has no excuse not to win next year. Now, obviously, the next
Hmm.
2 weeks are going to tell the tale because we'll see what roster retention looks like for the schools across the country. But Florida's loaded with talent, man. There's a reason that they hung in with some of the best teams in the country, including Georgia. There's a reason they beat Texas. There's a reason, that they were in the game at Ole Miss. And so you're right. That's Billy Napier. Billy Napier's fingerprint is on that, and he left the cupboard full, like full, full, full.
Hmm.
So we'll see. I'm inclined to think you take the offensive coordinator position away from him and make him. Don't make him hire a yes man flag waver. Make him hire a legit OC. I
Yeah.
think he could be. I really think he could spend a few years at JMU, come back up to somewhere Power Four, and be one of the greatest coaches in the country. Because I think that was his biggest issue. Give up the clipboard. He's probably still coaching in Gainesville.
Yeah. I mean, that's very possible. There's so many times that to me he looked lost on the sidelines in big games, and it may have been the stress of being the head coach and calling plays. I don't know.
See, I've heard you say
Um,
that before. I don't think I've ever gotten that sense. What I got was stubborn. More like this is the way we're gonna do it. This is when we're gonna call timeouts. This is when we're gonna put so and so in. Um, like they lost ETN because he kept putting Montrell Johnson in over him. And I get like he's got loyalty to upperclassmen who work hard, and I understand that. But I mean, like, if the guys under them are also working hard, you can't just put the guy in who's not as good because he's older. Like
right.
he just that's not a good decision. Um, so I don't think he ever looked lost. I just don't think he was. I think he was a good game planner, like a good schemer. I just don't think he was good at calling plays. I think he had it in his mind that he was going to do this formulaic thing no matter what, and he was going to stick to it. And some variation of draw, screen, draw, or something like that. With like every third or
Hmm.
fourth drive, do a medium or long range pass. You and I kind of looked at each other in disbelief last year when we were at the cocktail party because Florida had the ball with like, I don't know, a minute and a half left or something, and in the half. And I don't know if Florida was leading or it was tied or it was close. Well, Florida just starts handing the ball off. First down on the 20, hands it off. Well, Kirby Smart calls a timeout. Hands it off, calls a timeout. Now I get you got your third string guy in, but I also feel like Billy Napier's doing that with his first string guy.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is I think he's a great schemer. I think he's, like you said, great evaluator, great recruiter. I think he's a really good guy, but I think he's stubborn. So I think he is a good
Hmm.
coach. I just think he's stubborn, and that got in his way. But look, look. He tried to emulate himself and model himself after Nick Saban, and I think that is admirable. Like I'm not scoffing or turning my nose at that. But there's a reason there's only one Nick Saban.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so much deeper than just a system that you stick to. I think it's a belief that you have and trust in yourself to take left turns when you need to. Otherwise, stay the course religiously.
Hmm.
We saw Nick Saban a couple of times go from being the first 3 or 4 or 5 years of Nick Saban at Alabama, I couldn't stand watching it because it was like they'd get a 3 touchdown lead and they would lull you to sleep and it'd be the most boring game you'd ever see in your life. Then all of a sudden you get guys like Mac Jones and Bryce Young coming in and they're throwing the ball all over the field and their defense is changing because the game was changing. So he
Yeah.
didn't just say, I'm a defensive coach, we're going to do it this way. He said, okay, well, the game's changing. We need to evolve. And they did. And they kept
Yeah.
evolving. So
Yeah.
there's an art to it. Like it's not a science. Nick Saban just had the best instinct we've ever seen for that. And so
Yeah,
I'm not
and
turning my nose up.
he held on longer to his old style of run the ball, play defense, and throw on third down than probably was wise. But he had so many athletes, especially on the defensive, and he was schemes to on the defense side of the ball that he was able to do that until he realized he had to make that change.
Well, and I think if you're
And
having
then,
two lost seasons, that's one thing. I think if you're missing
yeah,
bowl games, it's different. He never let it get to that point. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so, I mean, but again, I say all that to say I'm not turning my nose up at Billy Napier. I think Billy Napier is a good coach. I admire what he was trying to do, but I think that it's sad because I feel like most of the country saw a year and a half or 2 years ago that what he was trying to do needed some tweaks, and he just wasn't willing to make them. But he's got a
mm-hmm.
new opportunity, and hopefully it's a really good one. So,
All right. Well, if the track record for JMU holds in 2 years, he'll be in another Power Four job because it's now. Now that being
yeah,
said,
he won't be.
Tom
Yeah,
Cincinnati was there for a long time before taking the Indiana job. But it's
yeah.
just funny that like
Well, and I think
over the
Billy,
last two
I
seasons, they've had two coaches go to Power Four
mhm.
jobs.
Yeah, well,
So
it's been such a good situation. I think Billy though
yeah.
will need more than 2 years to rebuild his reputation because I think he's capable at coaching at a school the caliber of Florida. And I personally think that he probably won't leave JMU for just any school. And so I
Hmm.
think he's going to need 4 or 5 years for one of those big names to say, okay, let's do it. You know what I mean? Let's
Yeah,
take a chance on him.
he'll
So,
have resources at JMU.
mhm.
That's for sure. Like they're a very well endowed school. I don't know what their endowment is, but I know like resource wise, especially for a group of six, they're top line. I mean, they're the guy I work with. He's from that area. Well, he lived in that area for about 20 years, and like they're one of the richer schools in that area. The
Yeah,
doctors and lawyers and stuff like that go through there, and so they have a lot of support. Which again, Virginia is such a weird state. I mean, they have all these big schools. Virginia Tech being the two biggest, but like they're smaller schools like an Old Dominion, Virginia Tech, Richmond, VCU. Like they get the support from their fans, whereas like South Alabama, Southern Miss, um, you know, uh, La Tech, Louisiana Lafayette might not get because of LSU, Alabama, Auburn, you know,
hmm,
State and Ole Miss and Mississippi. Um, it's a little bit different,
sure.
up there as it is to down here in the deep South. Um, and even going into Florida State, Miami, that takes the majority of the support of the state,
Yep.
of the fans, and so even the fans, the alumnus of the schools like a FIU or FAU, they may support them, but it's not on the same level that they're supporting Miami or Florida State or
Right. Yeah.
Central Florida is a little bit different now because they're in the Big 12. Um, they seem to be growing pretty quickly, but so they're a little bit odd there in the state because they're kind of in between from where they were to where they to where a Florida and all is. As far like the support and stuff you see out of the fan base, but
Yeah. They're not really in between, but they want you to think they are. Um, the- so here's the thing though. UCF is they are one of the largest on-campus student bodies in the country.
Mhm.
And look, I grew up in Florida, and all of my friends, myself included, always talked about going to Florida, Florida State. Not so much Miami, just because Miami's a lot more expensive, and the things that Miami are good at are more like niche things. Like they have a really really awesome like oceanography program. So if you want to, but
Right.
I didn't know anybody who wanted to go into that. So Miami's a good school, but it's good in some areas that you don't see as much. So Florida State were kind of the ones. But here's what I can tell you: is that the people who went to UCF, not 1-to-1. So if you went to UCF, don't get mad at me. But UCF was a lot of people's third or fourth option if they didn't get into Auburn, if they didn't get into Florida State or Florida, because UCF's a 2.0 to apply. When I was in high school, I don't know what it is now. To even apply for the University of Florida, you had to have a graduating GPA of 3.5 to apply.
Wow.
And Florida State, I think, was maybe 2.5. UCF is the largely considered the party school. So I say all that to say this. Is it a drive-through to get your degree? No, but it's close. And so by sheer numbers, maybe that offsets the support, right? Like maybe their supporters and their alumni are large enough in number, that the sum of their parts equals better resources, than
Mm-hmm.
a typical school of their ilk. But the reality is you're not going to see guys like Tim Cook, who graduated from Auburn, who's been the CEO of Apple since Jobs died. Like you're not going to see
Right.
a Tim Cook graduate from UCF. That's not to say UCF grads are useless. They're not useless. I'm just saying, like, it's not Harvard. It's not, and it's not like a top public university. So that was a long way of saying UCF wants you to think they're in the middle. They're really not. I mean, they and USF are honestly very, very similar. I think that UCF does have more resources, but I think a lot of that has to do with, like I said, the fact that they have, I don't know, 55,000 students on campus or something like that. I mean, it's pretty stupid.
Wow.
I don't know what the actual number is, but I know it is. At one point, they were like 10,000 students larger than the University of Texas, which at one point was the largest. So, so lots and lots of students on campus there.
I think Southern has around 18 at any one time. Like Southern, Ole Miss, and State all kind of go back and forth on which one has the largest uh, body of students at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the financial thing is what you're graduating, right? So Southern teachers and music and nursing and stuff like that, whereas like Ole Miss is doctors and pharmacists and lawyers, and State is
Agriculture.
engineers and art, yeah, and stuff. So, and of course, with the SC aspect for them, they get that financial benefit as well.
Well, but that's
But
that's kind of what I'm saying is like the way it's structured in the state of Florida, like if you, like I said, if you want to do like meteorology, you're probably going to go to Miami or you're going to go out of the state. If you want education or music, you're going to Florida State or Stetson. If you want to eventually be a doctor or a lawyer or a politician, or something like that, you're going to go to Florida. Now, it's not quite that simple, but I know a
mhm.
student at Florida who's a family friend who is like a third-year biochemical engineering major. Um, but most of the SEC schools, unlike you at UCF, you mentioned Southern being around 18. Outside of Vanderbilt, because Vanderbilt's pretty small, but Vanderbilt's also an elite university
Mhm.
academically. Um, they outside of Vanderbilt, I feel like, and I don't know this, but I feel like the student body population at most SEC schools is probably between 15,000 on the low end and 30 or 35 on the high end. Um, it may be a little higher than that at some of the schools. Like I don't know what Arkansas is, I don't know what Oklahoma is. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think generally, you mentioned 18,000. I mean, I think that's pretty normal for like
Mhm.
an established university that's been around a long time. That's not either like a 2.0 graduate and get you out school or a Vandy type school.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's the thing though. Southern has programs that excel. I've never heard anybody
Hmm.
say, "Oh, UCF so and so is the best." I've never heard that ever. And I don't have a problem with UCF. I'm just saying like I grew up in that state, lived a lot of my adult life in that state. Never heard anybody like be like I aspire to go to UCF, you know.
Right.
So,
Yeah. It's funny you said that about Miami because the first thing I thought of with Miami, because I love Shark Week, and there's always their oceanography, like their marine biology department is featured in that quite a bit because of their location, obviously. And that was the first thing I thought of with Miami was, oh, it's got to be the oceanography, like the marine biology and stuff like that, because like I
yeah.
see that all the time with Shark Week.
Well, what's funny, so I don't watch Shark Week as much. I watch it a little bit, but I love documentaries about like hurricanes. Not like
Hmm.
the damage of hurricanes, but like the actual like system of what a hurricane is. And basically, every time I watch a documentary, there's somebody from the University of Miami. That's why I mentioned, and they have like a lab there that like can recreate a miniature hurricane at any category force. To study
Oh,
like
neat.
the patterns, and so that's why I was, I know that school is
Yeah.
heavily involved in that. And obviously, I didn't think about marine biology, but that makes sense too. Um,
Yeah.
but the thing is, like, to go to Miami, unless you have lots and lots of scholarships, like you kind of got to come for
It's a
money.
private school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you kind of got to come for money because not only do you have to pay for the school, but you have to afford to live in Coral Gables while you're there. Which anything south of Fort Lauderdale, you know, probably if I had to guess 15-20% above the national average cost of living. So, not cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the podcasts I watch is talked about how Miami's becoming like the top city in the country, and it's really growing and stuff. So the housing market there is exploding right now. So it's probably even more expensive to go to Miami than
That's
it would have
really
been.
interesting because I love the state of Florida and I used to not like the city of Tampa that much, but it's grown on me. Love Orlando, love Jacksonville, love Pensacola. There are even things about Tallahassee I like. Tallahassee's a weird. No. I say that because it's a weird city, and because of the way the
Yeah.
capital's set up, it's weird. But it's growing on me a little bit. But the main thing is there's no good exits off I-10. Every exit you get off is kind of a nightmare. That's why I didn't like
Yeah.
Tallahassee. But
I've only
um,
been that one time, and I where we were, I enjoyed it. And there's a spot right off campus I really loved. Um, like down the road from the football stadium. There's like almost like a little downtown area that
mhm.
we went to. Me and a buddy, and we walking around some of the shops and stuff, and I was like, this would be so awesome in Hattiesburg if we had an area like this, that
Yeah,
really
there's a
was
little storefront
like that.
mall out there. I don't know if that's what you're talking about. It's not so big as an outlet mall, but it's pretty big, like as storefront malls go.
This is just like almost like just like a downtown like shops and stuff like that. We walked into one of the shops in there and was looking around, and it was just all like college merch stuff and all. And
Yeah,
I actually sent you a picture from in that store, but like you walked in and the smell and stuff in the store, I was like, oh, this smells like a college like merch store should smell.
yeah,
It got like that leather and candle
yeah,
and I was like, it's a really cool. I would love some areas like this in Hattiesburg
yeah.
or right around campus.
Well, so Tallahassee, I will say this around the football, and this will be our last thought because we need to hop off here. But around the campus, Tallahassee's awesome, and the campus itself
Hmm.
is awesome. And I will tell you because I've been to a lot of big time stadiums, both pro and college,
Hmm.
and the game day environment outside of Doak Campbell is as good as anything I've been to. And I've been to Notre Dame Stadium, um, which is an experience in and of itself, and it's one that can't be replaced. But like if that was the game day environment I was going to every week, I mean, I would never get tired of it. It's really good. They have it set up really
Hmm.
well. They have it flows really well. So there are a lot of great things around the university. I'm talking about when you get outside of the footprint of FSU, it's weird.
Right.
It's a weird city. But I say all that to say I used to have to go to Miami once a month for about 8 months. There was a period where I was going there once a month to link satellites. for this job I was working for, and I think I'm okay if I never go there again. Like, it was cool to see once, but like
Right.
it's not like, every big city's got its own quirks. Like Atlanta, the traffic's so bad it's an hour to get everywhere. Miami is actually, though, it's kind of spread out along these two interstates, and it's not organized super well. So as a lot of cities aren't, but you kind of go through good areas and bad areas really quickly. Like, for instance, where the Dolphins Stadium is, it's way, way, way off the highway, but you can see it from the highway. It would be
Hmm.
similar to seeing Tiger Stadium from the interstate. When you look out, you can see it, except it's about twice as far. Because when you look at Tiger Stadium, it looks imposing. When you
Yeah.
when you look at what's it called now, Sun Life or Hard Rock. It's had
I still think
pro
of Joe
player.
Robbie Field.
So we were talking
Pro
about it
play.
last night.
Yeah.
I had some guys over, and I called it Pro Player by accident, and he was like, Pro Player's like, sorry, yeah, what is it now? And so he actually looked it up, and he said, did it used to be Joe
Land
Robbie? I
Shark.
had never even, I had never even
Yeah.
heard of Joe Robbie, and he said that too. He said, was that the one that was Joe Robbie? But yeah, it was Land Shark for a while. But anyway, but it's way off in the distance, and that's in a terrible, terrible, terrible area. It's called Miami Gardens. And contrary to popular belief, if you're listening, I want to set the record straight, and then I'm going to stop talking bad about Miami. South Beach is not an interchangeable term for Miami. South Beach is a neighborhood within Miami. And it's like 1.5% of the entire city. So if you've never been there and you refer to it as South Beach, stop it. Just stop it. That's
I've never
like,
been there, and I've never referred it to the the
no.
furthest
Well,
south I've ever
most
been
people
is
don't.
Orlando.
Most people
Yeah.
don't, though. Most people.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised to hear that, because most rational people don't. But there are people who do it, and it drives me nuts. It's like, unless you're going to South Beach, don't say South Beach. No,
Right.
we're not in South Beach watching the Dolphins. No, we're not in South Beach watching the Heat. We're in Miami, or in Miami Gardens. I'm
Right.
okay if you wanna call everything Fort Lauderdale and South, or Fort Lauderdale and Southeast Miami, because that's the metro area. That's fine. Don't call
Right.
it all Long Beach. Like it's similar to calling all of LA Hollywood, except it's way, 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 way worse, because South Beach is way, 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 way less renowned than Hollywood is. And
Right.
LA, if we're being honest, LA is one of the most famous cities in the world because of Hollywood.
Hmm.
South Beach is, famous because of like Will Smith. So, Anyway, go to Miami if you've never been there. It is beautiful. But to me, it's like a one trip's enough type destination.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're gonna spend money, go to Orlando. Go to the parks there. Go to Tampa. There are lots of places in Florida that are amazing. Go to Cocoa Beach. Go see the Space Center. Just that's
Yeah.
good.
I do want to make a trip down to NASA. To
Yeah.
what's it? Kennedy,
Kennedy.
Space Center in there.
Yep. And the original Ron John in Cocoa Beach. That's really cool to see. Lots of great things along there, but once you get south of Cocoa Beach, there's nothing really to see except the Space Center. That's it. But all right, so look, I said this was going to be a short episode, and we went a really long time. But that's my fault. And as Quacker and I do, sometimes we like to go off on tangents. But that's this is our show, and if we want to do it, that's what we're going to do. So, all right. So thank you guys for joining us. I will be back tomorrow night riding solo to do Southbound, as Quacker has held it up the last couple of weeks. And then we'll be back together on Thursday to do an official playoff review. Quacker, where can people find the show?
You can find us on. Where can you find the show now? It's Twitch.
Twitch, YouTube.
We're on. Yeah, Twitch, YouTube, Alumni House Podcast. On Twitch, it's all one word, Alumni House Podcast. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Alumni House Podcast, and you can find us on X, Alumni House Pod.
All right. And you can find our personal handles just below our faces. So with that, thank you as always for joining us. And if I can get my mouse to work, sorry about that. Hopefully it will not be nearly as long next time. And we will see you tomorrow night for Southbound. Have a great night.